anyway, pleased to meet everybody again. I'm Richard Cramer. I'm a solicitor, 40-year qualified. Most of my sort of working life, I've been a partner. For about 25 years, I've had my own business. And I moved in the summer to Arch.law, which is a distributed law firm. Uh, I would have had the arch.law sort of banners, but Alice left it a bit late and my marketing team couldn't get me organised. But here we go anyway. So yeah, arch.law, we we say delivering legal solutions differently. How, I don't know, but that's what arch.law is all about. Today, and obviously part of my role with LNP is the focus on sports media and reputation. I do, however, have a broad range of clients, mainly Leeds and West Yorkshire, but I do work nationally. So my hotspots really are kind of SMEs, small family-run businesses, directors, shareholders. Over the last few years, I have developed a niche in the sports media and entertainment department. So there's 40 years legal experience, specializing in complex litigation, commercial matters. I kind of built my reputation in that sports media and entertainment. Very familiar with the business and property courts, and also we have in sports, in particular football and rugby league and rugby union, we have arbitrations. Rule K disputes is the football equivalent of formal arbitrations. Arch.law acts for businesses, individuals, professionals, and what I have noticed since I've joined, there's a high caliber of lawyers. There's probably about 100 within the group. And I would say probably, ironically, sort of as I'm coming to the latter years of my career, I'm probably working with better quality lawyers than I ever have done in my career. The sports law practice, I suppose I've been very fortunate that I first got a taste of sports law, actually, but even sports law didn't even exist. But when I did my training contract all those years ago, some of you weren't even born then, that was back in 1983 to 85. I worked with a local firm in Leeds called Teeman Levine. And Ronnie Teeman was probably one of the first sports lawyers in the whole country, mainly because he was acting for a lot of the Leeds United footballers, but then started to build a reputation representing footballers, usually going to Italy. So his claim to fame was the first sort of big name was a player called Liam Brady. Some of you might remember that played for Arsenal, and he moved Liam Brady over to Italy, and then he built a reputation, sort of either acting for Italian clubs or acting for players, and that was really my first taste of sports law. And I then, after my training contract finished, I then just sort of went into general practice, but I always had a real passion for sport. I think that probably stemmed from I was brought up in the horse racing industry because my father was a bookmaker, not particularly glamorous, and I used to say was the only skint bookmaker in England. But again, when you sort of in that kind of sector, sport becomes really part of your DNA. Sports law is very wide ranging. People often say, "Oh, what do you do? You do sport. Oh, is it just contracts, or is it is it just doping matters, or whatever it could be?" And it's very wide ranging, and that's probably because I've had 40 years in my career. I've been able to deal with contentious, non-contentious matters, and it's really developing enormously now, mainly because of the money that's in sport. I read an article, in fact, I put something on LinkedIn. I think the Premier League, which is a resounding success, has spent in the last 3 years £300 million on legal fees, which is an eye-watering sum of money. Most of that, ironically, would have been fighting its members. So the Premier League, imagine that to be a members club. If you're a member of a golf club or tennis club or a member of a gym, can you imagine you're the Premier League and you're fighting your members on a day-by-day basis, and you're having to spend £300 million, and that really tells a story where sports has really developed. And of course, as my dad used to say, where there's money, there's muck. So there's now, if I think Ronnie Tiemann was probably the first sports lawyer in the UK, there's probably 1,000 now, all plying their trade. Some of them are niche practices, some work within sort of departments within larger practices. In addition to sports stuff, an increasing development has been working in the media and dealing with reputation management. So media is an interesting one because traditionally, up until sort of the development of social media, you would be focusing very heavily on defamation, and that would usually be against publications. So, usually the Daily Mail would be the main culprits that publish a whole load of rubbish and gossip, and usually get it wrong. And so defamation courts were really designed for individuals that had been wronged in publications, and it ranged, not just the Daily Mail, but probably the big one was the sort of famous. We used to get the news of the world on a Sunday because it was complete rubbish, but it was always full of gossip, and there was always the kiss and tell stories in there. So the courts really dealt with kind of defamation at that level. It is probably the most expensive piece of litigation you could ever get involved with. You don't get much change. If a matter went to trial, you could quite easily spend millions of pounds. And so when my clients say, "Oh, I want to pursue a claim for defamation," I say it's for the Rooneys and the Vardys of this world. If you might remember that case in the last 2 or 3 years, where the wags managed to get involved in all sorts of shenanigans, slagging each other off and whatever, and they ended up going to court. I think Rooney succeeded against Vardy. And I think the fees on that one, I think the costs award in favour of Mrs. Rooney were about £2.7 million. So if Mrs. Vardy's had a costs order against her to that value, she's probably spent the same amount on her lawyers. So eye-watering numbers. You could go to a trial which can last 2 or 3 weeks, and the legal fees could be £5 million, which is a scary number. What we have seen, however, develop, and I've certainly seen probably over the last 5 years, a new type of defamation, and that's the online reputation, because as social media has developed, and that's quite wide-ranging from your Facebooks to your Instagrams to your Twitters or X, but also forums. These days, people just can gain access to all sorts of groups, and somehow, I don't know, there is a school of thought for some people that I can say what I want and how I want when I want, with immunity, and surprising when people do post stuff, and usually it's in a fit of anger or when they've had about 4 or 5 pints, They just get a little bit trigger happy on their keyboard, and they post some shocking stuff. Um, and so now the courts have started to recognise more that proceedings can be brought against individuals for a whole raft of defamatory stuff that might be posted on Facebook. That's usually the biggest culprit. And I don't know what goes through people's minds, whether they think, oh, well, it's just like pub gossip, or I can say what I want. Is highly dangerous. Um, and so um, the way forward now is often a what's known as a cease and desist letter. So literally, if somebody's posted something defamatory or even heading into kind of harassment, the way you can try and hopefully nip this in the bud is to send a cease and desist letter and seek undertakings to remove material, not to repeat, and to issue apologies. And with that, time's of the essence. Um, so just to give you an idea, a live case, I'm acting for a prison officer, and when she, nothing to do with her job, but she was the subject of being blackmailed uh, by a former boyfriend who eventually got imprisoned for it. When the reporter went to court, he painted a picture that the prison officer had been blackmailed in her capacity as a prison officer, which is highly defamatory. And the bar is very high to proceed. It needs to be serious harm. Um, and so we sent a pre-action protocol letter actually to the local newspaper that published this. But of all the proceedings that you could ever be involved with, there's the most time pressure in defamation because there is a 1 year time limit to issue your proceedings. And so when we got the instructions, she had gone through her own sort of self-help remedy, which was known as IPSO, which is the Independent Press Society. They looked at it, and whilst they didn't rule on defamation, they said that there'd been some bad reporting. It was misleading. By the time we got the instructions, which was the end of March, we were against the clock because the publication took place 3rd of May 2025. We sent a pre-action protocol letter, didn't get any response. Clearly, the publication were hoping to see the 12-month period expire. We managed to file our application online at the King's Bench Division in London on the 1st of May. So we were up against it. The time limits are brutal. There are no very rare exceptions to limitation time periods. So if ever somebody's going to bring a claim for defamation, you're against the clock. And as we all know, 12 months in our working lives goes very quickly. The other thing with online reputation is the longer any posts are on there, the more damaging it is. And so lawyers that work in the media have to be on it to immediately get the pre-action protocol letters down. The other hack that is available, but it's not so easy. If somebody is defamed or there's some offending material on social media, in particular Facebook, is to contact Meta. They don't obviously screen everything, but if there is a very strong, powerful argument that there is some defamatory material which is causing serious harm or could cause serious harm, a complaint to Meta can sometimes take that post down, but often the damage is already done. Businesses are also impacted, I find. To give you a real life example of something in the last 24 hours and how it can impact. So without naming the actual name of my client for confidentiality reasons. I act for a wedding dress shop in London, and they sell high value wedding dresses, ranging from £4,000 to £20,000. But a lady came in, she had a fitting. There was some issues with the fitting, but my lady's who runs the shop, very, very experienced. The mum decided to get involved and started raising all sorts of grievances about the service, and the dress didn't fit properly. And next thing is she said, well, I'm now going to publish online, uh, on social media, in wedding forums, how appalling your business is and how appalling your service is. That's impacting on my daughter. And uh, you have to act quickly because you can take years and years to build up a reputation, but you can lose that in a matter of days if there was something on any forum which is defamatory or is not true. Um, and so just being able to navigate uh, to protect a business is very important. Uh, and with I think most of us, that are professionals, you might be on some kind of forum, or you might be the subject on Trustpilot or review solicitors, or there's probably all sorts of online platforms, ranging from TripAdvisor to sort of, the Trustpilot is an interesting one for trades and businesses. Uh, and people can just post without any filtering some horrendous comments. And actually, sometimes I have had experiences where businesses have been defamed because an ex-employee who's been a naughty person decides to seek retribution, and they post false messages. But the damage can be horrendous and, of course, very stressful. So how I'd value, I think certainly when you work in the sports media sector, um, uh, you have to be very clear, direct, very responsive. Often when you work in the media, and it used to happen more with the sort of news of the world, but the amount of times I'd be called into the office on a Saturday afternoon because the news of the world or the Sun were just about to publish something the next day, and then you're in negotiations with the in-house lawyer for the publication. So certainly that education of responsive and pragmatic approach is crucial. So just to finish off, I say nobody's immune. You think you might be working your own little silo, but people could be posting stuff without even knowing. There could be some defamatory material about you or your business which you might not even know. So ensuring that you have the right profiles, check all the time anything that where your business would get mentioned. Make sure that you are fully protected. If any business has bad reviews, or it's clearly defamatory, or there's an ongoing harassment from a customer and there's stuff on social media, act quickly. There are remedies available. And I don't think I can ask anything else. I'm just happy to take any questions. Stop sharing now.
Yeah, Richard, thinking about lovely people like Mr. Joey Barton, who I'm sure you follow with interest. He's been the subject of orders against him, I believe. How sort of enforceable is it?
Well, Joey Barton's an interesting one because he He's controversial. He was controversial as a footballer. He was a bit of a thug on the field, and he's a thug off the field with his comments. And he has been taken to court, or not taken. Well, proceedings have been issued against him. I can't remember the name. There was a BBC Radio 2 presenter who he got
Yeah, was it
involved in.
Jeremy Vine?
Could have been Jeremy Vine. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think you're right.
It
Yeah.
was.
So Jeremy Vine made a claim against him. I mean, it's very rare it would ever go to trial. So usually there's an out of court settlement, which on that occasion he had to apologise. I think he had to pay some compensation, maybe £75,000, and I think he was ordered to pay £200,000 of costs. Um, he also was involved in a spat. He doesn't like female football commentators, and the lady Alenka, or I can't remember, but again, sort of one of the pundits he fell out with and gave her a good um, kind of real slagging off. And she also, I think, issued proceedings against him. I think he's actually in custody at the moment because he was involved in a scrap at his golf club. So yeah, and well, it shows. I mean, just anecdotally as well, because people can get very scared off by the costs of defamation. Usually, pre-action protocol letter, which cease and desist would usually bring about a result, is usually in the region of about 1,500 to 2,500 plus VAT. So it's not into those millions that I've just mentioned. That's when you issue proceedings and it goes to trial. Another remedy actually is some businesses could be harassed by, or individuals can be harassed by constant online messages and bombardment of messages. There is the Protection of Harassment Act 1977, and it's both a criminal and a civil claim that could be brought. I myself had a disgruntled client who refused to pay my bill. Um, for 10 years I represented him trying to get himself out of pickles for not paying people, and then eventually he did me up with not paying. But then he started harassing my wife and my business partner, saying terrible things about me. I went straight to the police. I went to Ellen Road Police Station. First time around, they just think you're a time waster and they just tell you to go away because they haven't got the resource. But I went to a senior level at police and I just said, look, I'm being harassed. He's making terrible comments to my wife and my business partner. And they went round to see him. They usually give them a warning to say, right, stop it. And if you don't, we'll come and arrest you next time.